Hey, it's Norm from Tested.
And Sean from Tested.
And we are thrilled to bring you another 3D printed project made by Jacky Wan.
AKA Velcro.
Jacky works with Ultimaker to design, print some awesome projects. We featured him before on Tested, and he's here from Toronto to share another one of his works.
Yes.
Let's go check it out. So we are back with Jacky Wan, also known as Velcro. And last time you chatted with Sean about one of your first projects that you 3D printed and you designed from scratch. Today we want to talk about a project that you actually modified and 3D printed and finished, and they're right here in front of us. These are some awesome mechs.
Yeah.
So tell me a little about these mechs.
So these are from Mechwarrior Online. It's a game. It's a free-to-play game that you can download and play, and they have amazing mech designs. I played Mechwarrior when I was younger, the really old ones. I think a lot of people have, and those ones are super low poly and old school. But they revamped all of the Mechwarriors in Mechwarrior Online. So these are some of the designs. I saw them, and I played the game, and I was like, these are amazing. So I looked online for miniatures that you can buy, but they didn't have them available because of licensing issues or whatnot. For whatever reason they weren't available. So I was like, hey, I have a 3D printer. I should try and make one.
Spoken like a true maker. If it does not exist, you can make it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So I went on the forums, and there was this big thread on how to get game assets for fan art. So I grabbed that and I exported some of these models. So this is the first one I made. It's a Catapult. At first I wanted to make a tabletop size miniature, but that scale is just too small for these kind of printers. So I thought, why not make it bigger? It's actually kind of cooler if it's larger. So I made this size version. And this was my first model. It was pretty simplistic. I grabbed the game files off the actual game, and then I had to do a lot of cleanup. So game files are sort of the opposite of what you want for 3D printing. There's missing faces. There's stuff in the printer training. Yeah.
Right. And like you talked about last time, when a game designer is modeling something, whether it's for a game or even for a production, for a film, they're going to texture it afterward.
Yeah.
The model is kind of that foundation, and you can do a lot of tricks in the rendering to give you some texture.
Yeah. So most of the detail on game models are done with normal maps. And that doesn't translate over for printing because for 3D printing, it only looks at the polygons that are there. So details these little grooves, they're going to be there. So you have to, after you clean up the whole model, you're going to have to put all that detail back in, if you want it to show up in your print.
Well, what does the model actually look like when you pull out the game, when you extract the files, and what can you load it up in?
You can load it up in whatever software they use. I use 3D Studio Max, but you can load it up in anything. It comes in as an OBJ file.
Okay.
I think they use the Crisis engine for this game, so there are sort of exporters that you could use to get it into whatever software package you're using. But I use 3D Studio Max, and it comes in pretty shoddy. There's faces that aren't welded. There's missing polygons. Anyway, the majority of the work involved in these are actually just cleaning up the model, cleaning it, and adding detail. And
so that's two steps. One, actually making it a watertight, printable model.
Yep.
And then two, actually adding more modeling of your own.
Exactly.
That's detail.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's one more step where I decided to add joints and stuff onto this model. So I broke this apart. Once I had a good model to work with, a cleaned up model that I could actually manipulate, I broke this all apart so that it could print in the right direction to get the maximum amount of detail. And then I started to design joints to go into the model.
Do those things go hand in hand, both the print direction and kind of how you break it down, whether it's an arm, a torso, a leg? Because I can see, for example, in the shoulder here, you're printing side to side.
Exactly.
It goes flat that way, and I imagine that itself is one piece.
Yeah, so you can see the seams in this rocket launcher, and then also in the legs, and that's where I sort of broke apart for the printing direction. Now this was the first one I did, so it wasn't the best. I printed.
Looks pretty good.
It's because it's painted. But in terms of just sheer print direction and model, it wasn't that great because it could have been printed much more efficiently. Now that I see it now, but this was the first one, and then this was the second one I made, which had I had much more experience after working with this one. So when I made this one. I knew how to like organize the prints better, and I put all the joints in there properly. So there's actually a joint in the shoulder. There's like a ton of joints in here.
It's a lot of complexity. I mean, if you look at something just like the foot, that's not something that just prints off in one piece.
No, it doesn't. And a lot of people think you can just grab game assets and then just translate it and then hit print. But that's not the case at all, especially if you want it to look really good. Because your printing direction matters the most in terms of getting the most detail out of your models.
Do you look to things like other model kits, for example, like a Gundam, and how the parts interchange and lock together to
I've seen them, but I haven't really played with them myself. Like I wasn't much of a model builder. Like when I got a 3D printer, I was like, I started looking at that stuff, but I never had that experience beforehand. So I just sort of winged it.
It's like anatomy. Okay, you just got to be joints of the arms.
Yeah.
You want it to stand pretty firm, so the torso's got to be solid like that.
Yeah.
And then that's what you came up with. That's
I actually
beautiful.
put ball joints on the knees, or sorry, not the knees, the waist here, to get the proper pose that the game had. Like I wanted this to be able to pose like the game had it, and that was sort of my.
It's a posable action figure.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you thought you wanted to start with something that was more like Warhammer, like a tabletop gaming miniature.
Yeah.
And like you said, the print resolution wasn't necessarily going to be good enough, or you wanted more fidelity.
Yeah.
And so you went with like a 6-inch tall action figure.
Yeah.
Totally awesome.
But I thought it was cooler. Like once I only thought that I could make a small tabletop, but then when I thought I could make it bigger, it was like sort of it all opened up, and I'm like, oh, this could be even more awesome. And that's when I started designing joints into it, and so this is the last guy that I made, the latest one, and this was actually a charity genner. So the people on Mechwarrior Online, you can buy this, and then all the proceeds went to charity.
Oh, nice.
So I made one. I made 3 of them. I kept one, and then I gave one to I gave one to the charity person, and then I gave one to PGI, who's the developer for for Mechwarrior Online, and yeah. So this one is a little different from this guy. I learned even more from this guy, and I applied all that to this. And basically, this one has no seams where I didn't want it. Like if you look at this one, there are seams where the knees are, and that shouldn't be there.
Right.
But for this one, I broke it apart enough that it required no seams. The ball joint was like interlocking, so once I assembled it, it would tighten the ball joint. On this one, the ball joint's a little bit loose. Like after a little bit of play, it started to not work so well. So this, I learned all my lessons here, and I applied it to here. And that's sort of the progression of my action figure game making adventures.
From doing CG models to designing your own action figures, basically. What about the finishing process? Can you talk about how you painted these?
Yeah, so I painted these with a paintbrush. I started doing airbrushing later. But basically, I started with a paintbrush. I was just like, hey, I got this cool model, and it looks pretty cool, but I wanted the finished thing. Yep. So basically, just base coat with paintbrush, and then adding the detail, and then dry brushing for the edges. So I think I painted these out of sequence, but I painted this one first. This was my test for an airbrush, actually. So I just kind of sprayed it, and I didn't know what I was doing. This one I painted a little bit later. So I just painted the base coat, did all the shading, and then I just used the paintbrush to do all the white details, and then adding the sort of weathering in the edges.
Edge detail, right.
And then this one I did the same thing, but I also had to paint on like all the little pictures and stuff on there. There's little ponies and like rainbows on this one. If you look closely, there's a lot of paint detail. So I just did that by hand.
Was there prepping of the model, of the pieces after you took them out of the printer to prep them for paint, sanding? I know you designed it so you couldn't see the seams.
Yeah, so part of this learning process was designing the parts so that it prints nicely so that it wouldn't have to sand so much.
Got it.
So I'm not a big fan of sanding things. And some of these you can kind of see it, especially on this one, the earlier one, you can see where the print lines are, and I probably should have sanded it. But for this one, I didn't have to sand almost anything. I had to fill some edges, like the top here, but for the most part, like it's not finished at all in terms of sanding or filing.
So what do you do for the filling? What's your process for that?
I just use like an aircraft modeling putty, and then I just fill it and sand it a little bit. But that's only like one edge here. Like there's really not a lot of that. I usually just go base coat, and then a primer will give you a good enough surface to start painting. And then if you use an airbrush, it sticks on well. If you use a paintbrush directly on the model, the lines of the print will actually pull the paint outwards, and that usually causes a mess. But if you do primer and then you do a base coat, usually it'll keep that somewhat under control.
Now, are these pieces, could these be broken down to pieces that you can then mold and recast in resin, for example? Have you thought about that?
You probably could, but I haven't tried that myself.
That's the next step.
Yeah, I'll probably look into that next. But yeah, I mean, it's broken apart into enough pieces that you could definitely try to cast it.
That would be great. Very cool. I love the aesthetic. I like that you can see that it's 3D printed, and the finishing job is wonderful. Where can people find out more about these figures?
So you can go on Mechwarrior Online. I posted there, and you can also go on ridicubricks.com where I post all of my 3D printed work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacky, for sharing with us your Mechwarrior Online models. We'll have more projects with Jacky, more cool things to show in a future episode, so stay tuned. Until then, we'll see you next time. Bye.